right. How's everybody doing?
Doing fine, Pastor.
Perfect, 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 perfect. All right. Looks like John dropped off, but it's good to have everybody on, Sister Henry and Trina, and I'm sure John will be coming back in. Got
Thank you,
an
Pastor.
all right. I got a topic that I put out there for us to have a conversation on, and really want our mental health therapist to weigh in on it. Um, I see something that's really catching. Unfortunately, in our community, we emulate things that we see famous people do often, and in many instances, we emulate behaviors. And it's something that I see going on right now, which I really I want to look at from uh, a mental health perspective. Is and I really don't have a side. I just want to I don't want us to maybe to try to figure out who's wrong or who's right, but just look at it from healthy behavior, and from a mental health perspective is what we're seeing out there now that's really catching a lot of steam. It's actually an interview that was done by Shannon Sharp, uh, former football player with Cat Williams, a comedian, and it actually hit, and it's I don't know if it's already did it yet, but once it hit 60 million, I think the other day when I looked at it, it was at 56 million. It would have been one of the highest viewed um, social media interviews that there was, or videos that there was, and so it's really hit. But the crux of the interview is the comedian by the name of Cat Williams. He came on and he just opened up, and he shared things that he thought about different people that are well known in our country, and blacks specifically, and it just got a lot of attention, and so I wanted to have a conversation with, and now you see more people coming out with the same kind of things, and we begin to emulate that even on our local levels. We kind of emulate that, and and I'm not coming from the standpoint to where one side is right or one side is wrong, but I do want to look at the idea of of the effects of the effects of the behavior, and it is the right thing. So one side is that the fact that hey, you got these things that are going on in our community, and when we ignore them, we just kind of perpetuate the issue. We kind of perpetuate the the problems, and this is what I would say. I would say like a gatekeeper. And when you talk about gatekeepers in the community, it's like people who reached a certain status, and then now they're like the gatekeepers. Allow some folks say with, and so from Cat Williams' point, you got people that are like gatekeepers in the entertainment industry and stuff like that. Shannon also interviewed Monique and talked about Oprah and people like that, and people that serve as like gatekeepers. They've gotten to a place, and they enjoy their status, and they want to kind of control who gets in or who doesn't get in. And so one thought is that don't if you just ignore it, you have a real unhealthy position that we're in, to where there are people that almost become like the people we despise, gonna become like the oppressor, and ignoring it doesn't fix the problem. And um, and sometimes in our community, we have had situations where Uncle so and so is this. He might touch the children, or he might have did this or might that, but you just kind of ignore it. You keep it in the family. It's a family secret, but everybody knows it. But you don't say anything because you don't put family business out there. And so that's one perspective that that you got these people who based on somebody else's interpretation, need to be exposed because they're not good for our progress, because they kind of get into positions and hold them down, and it's kind of like serving as a gatekeeper for this larger source. And then the other side is hey, if you don't expose it, if you don't bring it down, things, issues that have plagued our communities and plagued our home, our families for years, never go away because everybody's ignoring them. And we see stuff like that in our communities. In our communities, a lot of time, when somebody does something wrong, that nobody's gonna tell, and so you keep letting the people terrorize your community, because it's this thing that you don't snitch or you don't tell. And so I just wanted to have a conversation with us because I think it's just going to only get bigger and only go further. And as we do in our communities, we kind of emulate what we see popular or famous people do, and we bring them down. And so even like on the local levels, we see people. I'm calling them out. I'm calling them out, and kind of put people out there on blast. And is that a good, healthy way to do things? And not necessarily trying to deal with people techniques, but from a mental health perspective, you know, is this the direction that we want to go? Even I even think from the point of a church, we have church leaders that have made mistakes, or people say that they've made mistakes, and they kind of put them out there on blast. Some may have done it, some may have not have done it. But we got a lot of infighting where we're coming against one another. And the topic actually is a village at odds. Chaos of process. Is it chaos? Is it no order to it? When we're at odds and we put our stuff out there like that and we attack one another in public like that. Is it chaos or is it a process? Is it something that needs to happen in order to get to a better place? And so that's what I want us to begin to have a conversation about. And everybody can feel free to chime in, and I'll keep my eye on the chat. But that's the direction I want to go. Any thoughts on anything I said, or have I made myself clear?
Pastor Rawls, you made yourself very clear, and I think it's very valid. And what came to mind as you were speaking and saying that is to thine own self be true. And we have to, we're doing, I feel we're doing an in service to ourself if we do not speak about these issues and we do not get some clarity. Because if you know something is going on and you don't choose to put it on Front Street, what is it doing to you? How is it affecting you and your daily mental health?
Right. And so from your point, when you're saying when you hold that in, you're saying you could actually be not only damaging yourself, but you can be damaging others by not being, you said to your own self be true, by holding something in and kind of not being real with yourself about what you see that's really going on. It can actually cause harm. Is that what you're saying?
Yes, sir.
Mm.
Also, it makes me think about generational curses when you talk about, that uncle who bothers the children, but nobody says anything. So it kind of repeats itself and it's ongoing. So that also is a thought that comes up when you're talking about this issue.
Mm-hmm.
And
Okay.
also, how would it affect the children? Because you want the children to tell you if somebody's touching them.
Mm-hmm.
So if you don't say anything and you're teaching your child to say something, how would that affect the child? If the child said, well, how are you telling me to say something and this is happening and you're not saying anything and you're not doing anything about it? So how would it affect the children?
Mm-hmm. Okay. All right. And so seems like we pretty much agree that things should be said. So let's say, and I know that this is just not Bible study. We're dealing with real life issues. So and I don't know if you all have been paying attention. And so when somebody, I guess, that has maybe put themselves almost as a symbol for black excellence or black achievement or this right here, um, and and you have someone, let's say Monique, who's extremely gifted in her own right. I don't know if anybody's seen the interviews, but when she refers to Oprah, in her eyes, and as I mean, I can't say the things that she said, but just basically like a snake, a gatekeeper, someone that has her own self interest. And I know that there was an issue. She's talked about the Oprah thing before, and I know there was this big deal recently with Taraji P Henson, and it seemed like Oprah was really putting, really not being equitable and fair, where she's concerned, with her profession. But these people, blackballing, but these are people in our community that people have come to respect and look up to. And so when we come after our own, in public like that, and I think I hear Sister Henry basically saying, you got to be true, you got to be real. Is it the best way to handle it? And I guess in like in somebody like Oprah's case that has that kind of power, you probably don't even have the power to go and have a sit down. And so maybe you're only. I know when I was in St. Augustine and I wasn't fighting against family, I was fighting against some other folk. But the only way I can get them to do what I respond to my concerns was to embarrass them publicly, and because I didn't have the power to say, hey, sit down and listen to me. And so the power came when was able to disrupt their comfortable way of going on life as is, with no equity and no justice. And so it was like I had to do that, in that case, in order to, put pressure on them to respond. And I guess probably in these people's cases, that is probably almost the same idea, that I got to do it this way, in order to get things to change. I can't just sit and just wait for it to change and wait for them to do right. I got to do it this way, based on how I perceive them, as being harmful to our community. Any thoughts? Any thoughts? I know that.
Pastor, there's a saying out there that says too, I can't hear what you're saying for seeing what you're doing. And as we're dealing with our young people and people in general, we're saying one thing, but we're displaying another thing if they're sharing with us or confiding in us and we do nothing.
Okay, okay, and okay, yeah, I see what you're saying. With I almost thought you was going a different direction, but I see what you're saying right there. So, like with our young people, I mean, do you think it's a way to do this? And 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 I get real sketchy when I don't, I'm not I, I'm not I'm not as comfortable in trying to apply techniques. With the social justice work that I did, people were saying that I was too aggressive, to this, to that. But when people are fighting for justice and freedom, you don't get the chance. You don't get to tell them how to do it. Is it a way that in house, within the village, that we should handle our issues, or is everything, is it a free for all?
Society is so different than when I was growing up in the country, because back then the parents would take you if there was a disagreement or something with the children. They came together as a group and they ironed it out, and whatever was decided, whether you as the child agreed or disagreed, this was what was going to be done and how it was going to be done. But they always put God first. They didn't go there hot tempered and ready to. They prayed first
Mm-hmm.
as a
And,
group, and then they dealt with it. And so society has changed so that it does put you in a place that you don't know whom you're talking to and how to confide in them. And I joined this one, especially the mental health, because we as a race, we're embarrassed if we have to ask for help of our professionals in this
mm-hmm.
area.
Right. I
I was
agree.
gonna. I'm sorry.
No, go ahead. I was just asking for any more thoughts.
No, I was gonna say too. I think a lot of these. Well, I shouldn't say a lot of these issues, but I think oftentimes when we are in spaces where we can't control people's responses, and if the goal is to control the narrative, a lot of people get bent out of shape when they get put on blast or stuff becomes public that maybe was private, because they are trying to control the narrative. Like sometimes people say LeBron James, or even I would go, Kevin Durant had a burner account that he used to reply on Twitter and Instagram when people said negative things about him. And then one day he got exposed because he forgot to switch accounts and started replying to people's tweets and Instagram messages from his real account. And so when I make the comparison I'm making is that sometimes when we address things the way we address things, it doesn't allow people to control their narratives, and then things can get out of hand. But I think what you're saying, Pastor Ross, sometimes you have to make things public. You have to go about things in a certain way in order to get the required response. Because responding, trying to DM somebody or sending them an email or being polite with text messages doesn't quite work. And then sometimes some things that are done publicly have to be addressed publicly, and in order to kind of rectify the situation. So I think that in response to what was said before, yeah, some things you take the counsel and you try to sit down and you try to hash things out. You pray, you do those things. And then sometimes you pray, but then also the idea may have to be, hey, in order to get the responses needed, this may have to be something that needs to get blown up immediately. And blown up, I mean, like be put public immediately. And you can't really wait for, the slow process of trying to gently nudge things along.
And so then what makes me think about, because Sister Henry was saying that when she was younger, there was a kind of coming together. Hey, let's work it out, and then I guess in that way you can kind of still kind of hold the village together. But I think when what you're saying, and the fact that we're in different times now, that sometimes you only have leverage, if you blow it up, and but when you blow it up, it's probably more than likely not going to keep the village together, because people are gonna get offended. So I think that when we do come from that direction, because I understand that piece. I had a conversation with a pastor from St. Augustine that reached out to me today, and was asking, hey, what's the experience, from where you were to where you are? And I was like, it's different. It's different doing ministry in Gainesville than it was in St. Augustine, and so it was still out there on the forefront fighting, but I don't have to do the kind of things they use, the techniques that I used over there. It doesn't mean that the fight has stopped. It's just different techniques, and so I think that that sometimes you gotta do what it takes to get the result that that serves our community best. But I think that when you do that, I do think that you risk tearing up the village, and when we tear the village up, we probably don't have the kind of power. But the reality is when it operated the way that it did, there's probably really it wasn't effective as we thought it was anyway. When you had people that were kind of they were just running amok because they were given power by people on the other side of the railroad track, and then they were the ones kind of being used as gatekeepers to keep the Negroes in place, and so things really weren't as nice probably as we thought they were anyway before we blew it up. And so I think one thing that's really important is that if we have to use tactics like that, we really got to make sure that that we have our facts in place, because you really can destroy somebody's life if your facts aren't in place. I don't know the deal with even it's happening now, but there was something that came out about TD Jakes, and none of us will know whether it's true or false, but I do know when you do something like that, you can really damage somebody if your facts are not in place. And so if it is true, and that's the only way you feel like it can be addressed, and you've come to that point to where it has to come this way to get changed behavior, when you do it, you gotta be sure that your facts are right, and you're not going off of something a third party said or something that you assume. You really gotta be wise enough to move slow, because you really could damage it. And I think we're in a place right now to where the village is already being destroyed. I think I think it started, with integration, and the villages being torn down and separated, and we literally lose power. When we'll allow ourselves to be not monolithic to where we think alike, but when we allow ourselves to get to the place to where we don't like each other and we don't trust each other. I think it weakens us as a people, and in the end, people that benefit from us being weakened as a people, um, they continue to win because now they've kind of broken down the fist into two fingers. Any other thoughts on this conversation right here? If you're online and you want to type something in, and the topic is a village at odds, chaos or process. We have issues that's going on right now in our city. A lot of gun violence. We've had a spree of murders already, and in just 1 month. In our small city, and people differ. On how do we deal with this? How do we? Is it the government's fault? Is it the police department's fault? Is it the community's fault? What's going on? We got issues going on with low performance in some of our public schools, and so what do? You see things different. How do you respond to it? And I think we really have to be wise at how we do respond, because if we go from the passive approach, you just kind of, this thing with the schools didn't just happen. This been going on for 15 years and just deteriorating, and all they're doing just keep closing down our schools that sit in the middle, of black neighborhoods, so that they don't have to worry about you know getting too many of us in one school with the idea that that we don't have the ability to achieve. But I think caring and sharing and learning school shows that no, you can have a school full of black folk. We can still achieve. But I think that what happens is all these issues that when we do blow it up, it's a high risk, and we risk. I guess we risk the chance of you know getting not getting it right by not blowing it up, but we also risk the chance of building teams, strong teams to help address the issues in more productive ways. But I think we should really have our facts together when we begin to label people as this or that.
Pastor, I totally agree with that. And the problem is one of the things, in order to have a solution, you have to deal with all stakeholders. You can't deal with educating the child if you don't involve the parents or the caregivers and the home and the community.
Mm-hmm.
So, as you said, you can't, I mean, we can't continue to make the bed and have it look good on the outside when you have not taken care of straightening the sheets and things under the bedspread. We've done that too long, and it's an issue. And you can't teach what the thing with the children is, if they won't come to school. Those 5 schools, I was there last night, and they were saying that the children aren't coming to school. Well, the children don't get themselves to school at 5 years old. There has to be an adult or someone who assists. So that makes me know that it's a bigger problem than just, if they get there, then you can begin to give them the supports and help them progress, but they've got to get there.
And your point is a great point, because I see it just like you. But there's some in our community that says that no, you can't blame the parents. It's the schools. It's this and that. And I think like you say, all stakeholders have a role in it. And but once we start firing off the blame, we just have to understand there's some stuff that we just can't, we can't take back. And so we got to be wise, and like you say, get everybody to the table, because there can be irreparable damage that's done by going too hard, but there can also be irreparable damage that's done by ignoring it. And so I think we really have to use wisdom in that case. But I completely agree. But I guarantee you, I can't say numbers, ratios, and percentages, but there's a whole nother side in our community that don't say that there's responsibility on the side of the parents, to get the children to school and to buy into education. There's a whole nother side that'll say other entities are the problem. and then we just and then those on the outside that benefit from, because there's a huge wealth gap in our community, and it comes from the huge achievement gap over the decades in our schools, and there's a whole nother side that benefits from the failure and the low achievement, and and so we have to figure out what's the wisest way and the most productive way, the healthiest way, to where we're not damaging ourselves, and we're spending so much time fighting one another that we're not even healthy enough
Yes.
to
Yes.
even be effective in what we're trying to do, because we're already getting it from one side, but now we're taking blows from the other side, that's within the camp, and we're a wreck as it relates to mental health, and can't even raise our children to the best of our abilities, because we're just taking blows from every direction, whether direct blows from being hit or direct blows from being hit by a system, and we
Yeah.
gotta work within ourselves. How did last night? I mean, I have my thoughts on the conversation from last night. But did it? But and so I didn't get a chance to go. How did that conversation go? Were we supportive as a community, or did we get into the name calling?
We did not get into the name calling from what I was able to observe. But then when I heard the TV 20 reporter say that there were, the parents weren't there, I have a question on that still, because how could she determine who were parents and who were not
Right.
by looking? You can't do that. And I couldn't see because I was on the front row because I introduced a couple of the administrators, the principals, so you don't look back. I couldn't see. I know that there were people. I mean, it was people were standing on the wall when I went up to introduce. I could see, but for her to say that there were parent, who? How do you know who a parent is
Mm-hmm.
in this
But
society? I mean,
right.
you
The
know, and
grandparents
so
be
and
raising
that
children.
that was like a biased or the way it was said. I was like, oh, I wasn't comfortable with that. But that was one of the things. Normally, TV 20 shows the same clip at least 8 times in one day. They never showed that one again, so I'm sure that one was pulled.
Divide and conquer gives us somebody to point the
Yes,
finger at,
yes,
from
yes,
within
yes,
the village,
yes.
and it might be true or might not, but is it the best tactic?
Correct. That's
Is it going to
yes.
get it? Yeah,
And
is
now
it
they
going to
did
get us?
the.
Go ahead.
Is it going to get us on the train?
Right,
You got to get on the train in order for the train to move out of the station.
right.
And I don't know, Pastor. To answer your question, I wasn't sure. I mean, I don't know. I didn't leave there with the. I don't know. I don't know where we're going. The question was asked at the end because they did keep it to just about assisting those schools. Um, where do we go from here, and what are they going to do? And I didn't get a clear answer.
Hmm.
But that's a personal. I didn't understand. It doesn't mean that it was not presented and that there were other people who got what they were saying.
Right, right. And so I think we have to, as a community, we got to figure out a effective. And I don't think our role here today is to tell people how to do it, but we got to try to figure out, is what I'm doing the most effective way to do it. And like I say, um, in St. Augustine, that wasn't my I didn't that wasn't my village. I was fighting against white supremacists, and so that was a different argument. So yeah, blowing it up was the best way for me to do it there, because I didn't have to worry about collateral damage, hurting people, who are part of my village, with what we were doing. But when it's a village that's already a minority, what's the best way? Yeah, yeah. Uncle Johnny's doing this. Uncle Johnny needs to be punished. That might be the best way, because you don't want Uncle Johnny to keep damaging. But we got to figure out what's the best way. Do we just expose people and just put it out there and throw everything out there, and whatever sticks, and we got to have those conversations. There were some things that John, that you sent me. You have any thoughts on that information that you sent me? I really like the piece about about airing grievances, and it talked about trying to find a balance when we're airing grievances, and it just kind of made me think about, yeah, grievances have to be aired. You can't, if you're not able to work them out and you see that they're harmful, you got to put them out there in a platform to where it looks like people are going to be pressured to respond. Um, but what it says, finding a balance. That's the piece that I wrestle with. What do you think they were talking about in that, John, in finding a balance in how I air my grievance? Because it even seems like they might be kind of trying to control how I
Mhm.
how I put it out there.
Yeah. No, I think I mean, it goes back to, like you're saying, the Cat Williams interviews and all these different things, right? So we're in this generation now where the idea is to go viral. The idea is to have clickbait. The idea is to present yourself in the best way possible while making somebody else look crazy or whatever the goal is, right? And so when we're talking about community and wanting to remain unified, if at all possible, when airing grievances, I think the first thing we have to consider is the platform and the way in which we do it, right? And so if the goal is reconciliation, or if the goal is to heal, um, not having all parties present, not at least having some initial, like, hey, we're going to have this conversation, come join us, we want your perspective on it. But when it's like a one-way tell-all and the goal seems to be just to run somebody down or to ruin a reputation, it doesn't work. But that's the society we live in now. That's the generation we have now. We want it to be sensational. We want to, to be able to, I don't know, just say what we have to say uninterrupted, because there's nobody there that, if I'm talking about you, Pastor Rawls, in a situation, and I have just the green light to go without you being there to rebut the things that I'm saying, to refute the things that I'm saying, or to speak up for yourself, I'm going to be more inclined to kind of just go and say whatever I'm saying, whether it's true or not, right? And so I think when you have a situation where someone's sitting in front of you, you're probably less likely to lie, less likely to make up stuff, unless you're just, somebody that's evil hearted and you have evil intentions. So I think, first we have to consider, how do we have the proper platform, and how do we address the grievance in a way that it's going to lead to healing, and allow people to have conversation and be heard, so that healing can take place. But again, if that's not what the person's objective is, then you already that it's problematic. But I think if we're talking about coming from a place of empowering each other, having good conversation, being able to air our grievances, we definitely have to consider the platform and who's involved, and that all parties that are going to be talked about can be present, and then have some kind of moderation. If I'm answering kind of your question when it comes to like
Yeah.
the public display of, going the public grievance or airing out of a grievance.
Yeah, it makes sense. That made me think about, and I'm referring back to an instance that happened when I was in St. Augustine. But again, this wasn't my village, but there was a person on the board of trustees at a college there called Flagler College, and 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 I didn't think that that person's behavior, something that person had said in public, was the best person, was should be represented on that board of trustees. And so we started a movement, and uncomfortable. It was uncomfortable for the people at the college. It was uncomfortable for the wealthy people. But we started a movement that was very disruptive to have that person removed or resign. And I remember the city manager actually asked me and that person if we could just, if we could go, and we went off to a park way out somewhere, if he could just pull us together to have a conversation. And so I agree in lining up with what you said. I don't want him there. I don't think he's a good representative. But I, as a adult, there has to be a conversation, because there may be something that I might be misinterpreting. I might be uneducated about how I read a response that he made to some other stuff that we were standing against. And so he brought us together. We went out there and began to talking, and but naturally with a lot of testosterone, me and my testosterone, and him and his testosterone, it blew up. But the idea was, we did try to come together. We did try to come together, and I think when you're in the same village, there ought to be an initial effort made to try to come together. But if people feel like they have so much power or so much whatever that they're not willing to have a conversation with you, and you think the conversation is important, you got to understand. I think you need to begin to understand this thing might go a different direction if I don't want to have this conversation, and when it goes a different direction, I might not like what happens, and so I think there should be steps, and I think we should, especially when we're in the same village, try our best to have some one-on-one conversations. If that's impossible, try to get a middle person in there and see if it can work out. But at least we tried before we had to kind of do the demolition work. At least we tried. But I agree with all of you that sometimes that demolition work has to happen, or you're going to 30 years later, you're going to be worse off than you are right now, because there's an issue that we're not dealing with because you don't want to hurt somebody's feelings. And this is a whole different world that we're dealing with now. And people get excited. People get paid off of hurting people's feelings. Like you say on social media, Shannon Sharp said that interview he did with Cat Williams, he said they had to bring his paycheck in a semi truck. They had to back it up to his house. It was so big. So there's incentive for the chaos. But how do sensible people, not go down that road?
What you're saying there is kind of like, they have different, if you think about like when you're trying to learn how to be a public speaker, you do a tastemakers or Toastmasters course that you can take to learn how to publicly speak and orate. But we don't have a lot of times where we have spaces to teach people how to deal with conflict or to resolve issues in a way that makes sense, right? So you have somebody that comes up to the school, their child is acting a certain way. Instead of being able to be sensible, bring down the emotions, have clear conversation, they come to the school flying off the handle. Their kid is dead wrong. Their kid is the problem. But as the parent, instead of trying to address things and figure out what's really going on, you just come in flying off the handle and you want to fight everybody, right? It's the same thing. Like, we have to know that, yeah, sometimes, like you're saying, hey, we go to a city council meeting, we say, hey, City Councilman John Parker, you're not right. And you address it that way. But if you can have conversations with people and go about things in a way that's private, because that's the best way to handle it, we got to be able to know what's the best way. And sometimes the way we learn in our communities or in our homes, we only know one way, and that's to come in guns blazing and to tear some stuff up and to throw some chairs and whatever. And we got to learn tact, and we got to learn, we got to modify our behavior so that we can get the desired results in a way that makes sense to do. And I think what you're talking about in this conversation, Pastor Rawls, is like there's more than one way to skin a cat, as they say. But when they say when you're a hammer, everything's a nail, and you just come in bang, 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 bang to every situation, it's usually going to result in losses more so than it's going to result in wins. And I think we have to do that as a community. We have to be better at teaching our youth, or even some adults. We got to sit them down and correct them and say, hey, the best way to handle situations, if you want a real result and not to get yourself arrested or whatever, depending on the situation is, or embarrass yourself or your children, we got to be better. And I think oftentimes some people don't want that. They want to be led by their emotions. And that's the way in which they want to lead the discourse. That's the way they want to lead the conversation. That's the way they want to lead things, because they think that's going to get them results they want. And they think getting drugged out by the police or whatever is cute. That's not it. Like, putting on a show is not it. But we've learned bad responses and bad ways in which to handle situations in our community, and we have to do better, because it's not getting what we think it's getting.
Yeah, I remember in our emotional literacy ministry with Dr. Gillis, that was like the major focus is that we can't avoid emotions. Our life, emotions are a part of our being, part of who we are, but we do have to learn how to read and how to understand our emotions, so that our responses can be more productive and more healthy. But we can't just get rid of our emotions. I'm mad, and I'm mad. What you did made me mad, and I can't just erase that and say I'm not going to be mad. No, I'm mad. But how do I understand this? How do I read my emotions? How do I respond in a healthy way that doesn't blow up the whole ship? It kind of makes me think about, and there's some things that we're doing sometimes as adults, just you gotta do what you got. It is what it is. But children, you can touch, and so even when we think about what we're gonna do, for our summer camps, we've been focused on making sure we understand who we are and our contributions to to the world, and really, showing, putting our the accomplishments of blacks on a pedestal, and making sure that our children know it, understanding that, in the state of Florida, that's the last thing that Tallahassee wants them to know about themselves. And so we focus, making sure they understand that. But it even sounds like we might need to also do some focus on communication skills. I remember when I was over a mentoring group that I was over years ago, that the kids loved it. We would do debates and teach them debate skills, and I would have the college students come and help me and just teach the kids debate skills, and they loved the debating, because they didn't have a problem with arguing, but what the trick was, we were teaching them how to argue effectively, and not just argue out of your emotions, and control your emotions, while you make your arguments. And so that sounds like something, this, because you were talking about the parent, and I see it all the time, that you love your child, you care about your child, and you're aggravated that they had to call you you were doing something else. But how do you communicate this right here effectively? And sometimes the older we get, sometimes it's a little bit more difficult. I was really surprised. We had a funeral, and it was a younger guy that got killed, and on the way to the cemetery, we just normally get it. We get in the line and we go to the cemetery, but the friends of this person that got killed, they were just like being real disruptive, going in and out, swerving into traffic and causing traffic problems. And the funeral home was getting upset, the escorts were getting upset, but it took us literally 40 minutes to get over to Sugar Hill, that cemetery there by Sugar Hill, because but these were adults. These people were like 30 and 40 years old that was doing this, and sometimes in our lives, it's more difficult the more years we have on us. When we think we know what we're doing, it's more difficult to say, hey, that's not smart. But maybe, if we invest in teaching our children these kind of skills, it might change the trajectory or the trends or directions that we're going, and we might see some progress, in 10, 15, 20 years. But communication seems to be a real important piece of based on what you just said. But we just can't sit and watch our community. I don't think we're good stewards if we just sit, especially if God has blessed us. I don't think we're good stewards if we just sit and just watch our community. I think if we take the stance that some people take, hey, that ain't my problem. I didn't raise my children, I did this, that ain't my problem. I think in the end it will be our problem. We're going to have to deal with the results of people that don't have the ability to communicate. We're going to have to deal with the results of people who don't know how to control their emotions. And we might be on one end of that person that's being blasted, and our reputation being ruined. And so I think we gotta. I just don't think it works well when the community is divided. And I think I'm not sure. Sister Henry talked about the report, and so I'm not sure who it was. But if we're allowing people to divide us, we're falling for the okie doke. We gotta know how to wade through that, because there are some people that benefit from us being divided, and so we got to be smarter. Anybody else got any thoughts about this topic right here? A village at odds, chaos or process? A village at odds, but we're definitely not monolithic anymore as a community. We got a lot of different thoughts, and but is it chaos or is it a part of the process?
So, Pastor, how do we move forward? Where do we go from here?
So I think the low hanging fruit is that with every effort, that every opportunity that we get, that we take the opportunity, don't pass it off to somebody else, to prepare our kids to to communicate and to understand uh, their emotions, and to understand the importance of, I think you said it earlier, of to thine own self be true. Teach our children how to speak up for themselves and say what's needed to say, but how, the proper ways and the steps that you take, before you just, kind of lose it. I think that's the low hanging fruit right there with our children. The difficult piece is I might teach them in summer camp, or I might teach them in church, uh, but then there might be something that when they go home, from somebody that sees it differently than I see it, and so even though the low hanging fruit is being able to touch the children, I think to really make a true impact, we have to figure out, you know, how to get this message through to the adults, not on how to do it, but counting the cost. And I mean, I definitely don't have the answer. That's why I got these mental health therapists on here. Definitely don't have the answers to that, but knowing, and counting the cost. Okay, if this is my action, do I was talking with somebody. I went to a meeting dealing with gun violence last week, and the police were talking about. They were talking about, hey, if they don't do this right here, we just gonna, lock them up, and that's the threat. We're gonna lock you up if you don't do this. I'm gonna tell you, I know some people that's been in and out of jail, and they don't care about going to jail. To me, that's a threat to me, because I I don't think I could. I guess I could probably handle it, but I don't see myself handling that. But to people that have been institutionalized, I got family. I know this for a fact that going to jail is no threat. That I mean they know how to survive. They know how to thrive in that setting. And so I explained to the law enforcement. I was like, yeah, that's a threat from your side, but from the side of the people that we want to demonize, that's not a valid threat. That's not going to change behavior. If you don't do this, I'm gonna lock you up. That ain't a threat. We got to figure out another way to these young men that are going around here shooting people. We got to find another way to reach their hearts. We got to figure out another way, and that involves accountability. And I don't have the answers. I know God is in there, but I think in the times we're living in now, you got to figure out how to slide God, and you got the Bible says with loving kindness, you got to figure out a way to draw them, in order to even have God to be a valid thing that they would pay attention to. And that's where we need expertise. And it's great having Christian therapists and counselors and stuff like that to be able to draw people in, that's not intimidated by God sending them to hell, or a judge sending them to prison, or a police officer arresting them. How do you reach the hearts of those people? And I think that's where we have to listen to the voice of God and listen to the skills that God has blessed people with, and figure out as a community how we do that. But just ignoring them and saying it's not my responsibility, it's just gonna get worse. Those are my thoughts. What are your thoughts?
Oh no, Pastor, thank you. I wasn't asking you for an answer. I was, as we were discussing this, because as you're saying, we're looking at the community and the village, and whatever happens to one of us happens to all of us. It might not be short term, but eventually we're all paying the cost of those incarcerated after doing wrong, or children who are going through the system and not achieving and being able to be a productive part of society. We're all paying the price, and where we are in society, economically, and so many other places now, it's a problem. So yes, thank you for that. That was a great answer. And we have to, it just took me back to the Bible stories that we learned as children, and I didn't get all the meanings, and I'm still working on getting all of the meanings. But the story of David, who went before Goliath with no fear,
Mm-hmm.
but he also, and through the I mean, but those are things that we knew, that you have to press forward. You cannot run away because the situation looks larger or bigger than you. You've got to have the faith and you've got to take that step forward. So
I
I thank you.
I was looking at one of these things right here. It talks about healthy alternatives and strategies. This is, that John sent me, and it said talked about constructive grievance communication. It says advocate for expressing grievances in a calm and constructive manner, promoting active listening and understanding. And I think even teaching people, first of all, don't just accept it, because I think some people just think that people just want you to accept it because it benefits them when you accept mistreatment. And so advocating and fighting, no, you come and you tell us what's going on. But let's use the skill set and how to do this. Let's try. Let's attempt to. I'm not telling you not to bring it, but let's attempt so we don't just catch everything on fire. Let's try to have some self control. Let's try to be calm, because I know even with myself, when I present something, the more calm I am, the more facts I remember. Sometimes when your emotions get into it, then when it's all over, you be like, God, I should have made this point. I should have made that point. But if I can, it talked about, that we advocate for people being allowed to express their grievances, but really encourage and equip people to remain calm and constructive in manner. And so it's not so much that I come and I say, John, you just this evil person, and I just hate you. But hey, John, man, I really don't think you are seeing it the way I see it, and this is how I see your actions, and what you're doing, and and try to teach people to basically, when I tell you that you're sorry, try not to say you're sorry. I mean, try not to tell them that they're sorry. Try to say it in a way to where you said what you said, but you didn't use a sledgehammer when you said just to try to keep the conversation going. Now, if that don't work, you might have to go back and get some more tools, to break up the heart. Being so hard, but to give communication a fighting chance and see if you can work your way. If you can work your way through that. And I think even our communities, we damage one another. This meeting that I was telling y'all that I was in last week, it's some pastors that I've made a choice that my thoughts don't line up with their thoughts, and so I'm probably not going to do good working with them. But we were at this meeting, and so it was some information that I was asking, about my community and where my church is, and some things that we started doing at our church to understand what our community is going to understand the violence, and then make a commitment that we might not be able to control the whole city, but we can control the atmosphere in our area. And so, hey, give me those reports so that we can get a quarterly update on how is our engagement doing, how is our walking through the communities doing, how are our prayers doing. Somebody said, well, we get that, and talked about a group of pastors. And so in a nice way, I turned back and I said, talking to the person, the law enforcement, I said, hey, everybody is not a part of that group, and I choose to not be a part of that group, but my church is making an impact in our area. And so again, I request that for me. And so basically, I was able to, in a calm way, kind of say, okay, Mr. Pastor, you're not gonna control this right here. I was real clear with them. Y'all don't have to give us any money. Y'all don't have to give us any kind of incentives. Just give us the information, and we take accountability for our community. You don't have to pay us to try to make our community better. And then I said those exact words. And so I kind of said what I needed to say, but I was, partial, kind of respectful in how I do it. And I think we just have to be equipped with getting our point across, but not just tearing the whole room up, not being like a bull in a china shop when we're getting our point across. But I think it's important for a person to know that that they can get their points across. So that was something recent that I just kind of just dealt with. But it helps me because everybody's real clear. He wants his information. So both sheriff and police department, they were real clear. And so they didn't send my information to some other group of pastors. They sent my information to me. And so now it made me happy because now I can give it to my church, and we can keep doing what we're doing, and know if we're being successful or not, or if we need to add more days. Right now we're doing 1 day a week. But I needed that other pastor to be real clear. No, you're not gonna control my information, I need you to understand that. And as long as you understand that, we can have a decent relationship. And I think people come with that right there. You gotta be respectful of people and what they're trying to do, and don't try to control their situation. Well, we are 4 minutes left. Anybody else got anything else that you want to say? I think if we share this information and people participate in the chat and talk to one another, we didn't try to provide answers, but we did try to provide some sense of direction as it relates to you know not specifically where we go, but what we probably need to do to go forward and not backwards in our community. And I like that. I like that piece that you got to be true to yourself. You gotta learn skills to learn how to communicate. Communication is important, and try your best not to blow the village up. But if you have to, just have all your facts together, and taking the steps prior to blowing it up. Any other thoughts? We got a whole 3 minutes left. All right. Everybody's good. All right. Let me look in the chat. I don't think I see anything in the chat. So I want to thank you all for joining us. I want to thank our therapists. I threw a topic that just was on my mind after just seeing just all the stuff that's going on social media, and knowing that it's going to have effect in our community, and we're going to feel like that's the way you do it. You just blow people up and throw people out there, but really have some thought put into how we resolve our differences in our community, if we're truly going to work together and try to put our children in a better place. And so if this was a decent conversation for you, feel free to share the post, and then have additional conversations with your circle. And we just have a whole bunch of additional conversation that let's get us to thinking. But I want to thank everybody for joining in. And if there's nothing else, God bless you, and you have a great one.
Good night.
Good night.
All right. Good night. And Bible study tomorrow night is in person.